and welcome to the Guardian Ashes Weekly, supported by Qantas, the spirit of Australia. Australia win the first test in 2 days. Seems like not enough days. What an extraordinary test match. First, Mitchell Starc won the game in the first over, then got career best figures. Then England came out and bowled like the West Indies in the 80s, all fast, all accurate. It was devastating bowling. Then Duckett and Pope looked to be meandering comfortably to a huge lead. Then a Bazball wafting at wide ones collapse. Then Carson Atkinson gave England a lead of 205. It felt big, and then Travis Head thought, I'll just do this by myself. And here we are. Questions then. As always with Bazball, when it doesn't work, it looks so bad. Is it worth asking if England will change when we know they won't? Millions of bleary-eyed Englishmen with heating on at 3 a.m. saying, don't drive at another wide one? Or should we just congratulate Travis Head and somehow pray it's different next time? This was England's chance. No Cummings, no Hazelwood. Australia having to fiddle their top order, and we blew it. How annoying. I'm Max Rushden, and welcome to the Guardian Ashes Weekly. On the panel today, our cricket correspondent, Ali Martin. Hey, Ali.
Hi, Max. Good to see you. And the spirit of Australia was certainly on show yesterday.
It was, wasn't it? Guardian cricket writer Jim Wallace. Welcome, Jim.
Hello, everybody.
And the Guardian Australia's Geoff Lemon. Hi, Geoff.
Hello from Perth. Yeah, well, I don't know. What do we say? Where do you start, Max? What do you do?
Well, Nick says Ashes Weekly might have been an overly ambitious name for this podcast. There are so many statistics coming out of this game. Yeah, I will just read. I'll just read a few of the stats. First time in 104 years, an Ashes Test match has been wrapped up inside 2 days. The second quickest Test match ever played on Australian soil. The third shortest Ashes match. England's 2 innings lasted a combined 405 balls. That's the fastest they've been bowled out twice in a Test since 1904. Travis Head's 100 off 69 balls, the equal third fastest by an Australian in Tests, the joint fastest by an opener, and the second fastest 100 in an Ashes Test after that Adam Gilchrist run at the Wacker in 06. Rab says it's nice they played a 2-day game as a prelude. Do you think England will be better when the Test series starts? We've had a night to sleep on it, Geoff. And I imagine it becomes a Bazball inquest pretty quickly. But should we start by congratulating Australia?
To a point, yes. But this was a game that was finished off by a freak innings, and 200 could have been enough, given the match that we saw play out before it. You know, any game where you need to make the highest score of the match in the fourth innings means it should be difficult in theory, but we also know, and we've seen this in England a lot over the last few years, that there are pitches that ease off, that flatten out, and that become easier to bat on later in the game, particularly when the fourth innings is on day 2. On day 2. Let's just come back to that point. The fourth innings being on day 5 is more likely to make it difficult to bat than the fourth innings being on day 2. I realise that's a relatively self-evident thing to say, but it's worth emphasising that. So the fact that England play in such fast-forward fashion, even though they'd given themselves something to bowl at, means that the relative degree of difficulty, a bit like Headingley 2019 with Stokes, where he was batting, halfway through the fourth day, not deep into the fifth day, you're never going to have as much to play with as a bowling side in terms of defending a score. So, yes, you can look at that Travis Head bit, but ultimately, for me, it's the incredible wastefulness of England's batting, which they got away with in the first innings by somehow managing to sneak away with the lead. But second time around, you're over 100 in front, you've got 9 wickets in hand, and you manage to botch it with not just some of your players, but your best players, your most important players, Brook, Root, playing stupid shots that are just totally unsuited to the conditions. And particularly in Joe Root's case, this is an experienced player who's been here plenty of times before and knows how he's got out before. That's the most culpable part of the entire exercise.
So the Bazball inquest has started. That's fine. I actually I had to go and do something for 10 minutes and Duckett and Pope. I came back and I walked up and Harry Brook was walking off the pitch, Jim. And I was like, what's happened there? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was carnage after lunch. In the media centre at the Perth Stadium, there was a lot of sort of Aussie journalists sort of in the doldrums at when they're having their lunchtime curry, and they were saying, England are going to bat us out of this. This is going to be all their old guys are going down. Khawaja's, looking all of his 39 years. Nathan Lyons looking a bit dodgy. A couple of long sessions in the dirt could have polished a few of them off. And then I was getting the lift back up, and I said, don't underestimate this England side's capacity to grab defeat from the jaws of victory. So I actually sort of had a sniff that sort of an inkling that something was going to happen. And just en route, Geoff, he was down the other end watching those wickets as well. So that was the real gut punch, I think, when Root chops that one on. And and he couldn't even drag himself from the crease. He sort of lay impaled over his bat for a good few seconds. Sort of couldn't believe what he'd done. So yeah,
and he's faced Mitchell Starc before, Jim. Like Joe Root and Mitchell Starc have been around for a while, and they've been around for the same while. You go back to sort of 2012. They've played God knows how many test matches against each other. He knows what Mitchell Starc does. He bowls quick left arm and angles it across you and sometimes swings one back in. And he's like, I think that's the ball that I'm going to try to smash on the up through cover point just after Harry Brooks got out. I think that's the one for me after I've made 8. It was just a bizarre lack of thinking from the one thinking player. England are supposed to have one thinking player in the side, and that's him. Australia are supposed to have one Bazball style player in the side, and that's Travis Head. And the one Australian player beat the 11 England players at their own
like
game.
Being on a stag do and the one sensible bloke is sort of tops off on the bar at 6 p.m. It's like, this is not
You're the designated driver.
We've got 3 more days in Benidorm to go. This is going to be a long old weekend,
He shaved off, someone else's eyebrow. You're like, Joe, you're not meant to be that guy. But Ali, I'm not saying it's futile to have a conversation about those 3 players not driving at wide ones on this pitch against this sort of bowling. But it's not going to change what they do, is it? Or is it?
I don't think it's going to change it fundamentally. I do think aggression is what suits this set of England players as selected, and it has served them well up to a point in the last 3 years. I've just been writing I'm just sort of halfway through writing my post-mortem of it, and I've compared it to like when you've literally told your toddler not to do something and they just do it anyway, and as Geoff rightly points out, for Root to be kind of tugging the cat's tail when you've just said do not do that, or rather his eyes should have told him do not do that, particularly on that Perth surface. I think it was the movement wasn't extravagant. There was about half a bat's width of nip. But in Perth, you have to play cross-batted to anything short. You've got to wait for the one that's very full, the half volley essentially, and try and push that down the ground. But trying to drive at a 45-degree angle, also because there's not a huge amount of value on these huge outfields, and it's very slow outfield as well. I mean, obviously, you want to pick up your 2s and 3s where you can. But it just seemed such an unnecessary shot. And the same goes for Brooke. I mean, he is the less experienced of the 2, but he is the vice captain. Ollie Pope is also the former vice captain. That is essentially what you're looking at as 3 senior players there who have let the side down. And I'm not even sure the kind of defeat from the jaws of victory holds that much, because the victory wasn't there yet. Like it wasn't. It was. England were in a position at 99 for 1 effectively at lunch, and 105 for 1 when the wicket of Duckett fell, where there was a challenge in front of them. Can you get through to tea? Can you get through to the point when traditionally, and I say traditionally, it's a pretty young ground in terms of Test cricket, but when the pitch does start to ease off? We saw it in the Test match against the India won 12 months ago, that they had to, I think I'm right in saying that they had to absolutely guts it out to get to the point and earn the right to get the conditions that Travis Head later exploited. 204, I mean, it was the highest score of the match. And, if England get after a better start, and perhaps even if Khawaja had been doing his job opening, that England could have made some early inroads. But, England had to, if England wanted to make merry on that pitch, the time to do it was after tea on the second day. But equally easier said than done. They should have been aware of the conditions of it wasn't just a sort of a serene, glide through to lunch from Pope and Duckett. They had quite a bit of good fortune there. There was quite a bit of movement. There was one ball from Mitchell Starc. I don't know how it missed the stumps, but it just about did. It was tough going out there, but it just felt a very shallow response to the situation in front of them, when they've been telling us for some time that they are growing and developing and learning to spot the moments in games when they have to really try and do the hard work. It felt to me like they were just trying to make a statement. They were trying to tip on Australia's heads far too early. The time to do that was after tea, but they couldn't even make it there.
And I reckon the first session, Ali, what you're talking about there is telling as well, because there was so much good fortune, because Pope played and missed God knows how many times. It felt like 12 or 15 times that he was playing, not defending, but playing big drives at balls and missing them. When you've had so much good luck, when you've got through to lunch and you've gone, well, Jesus Christ, we've had some good fortune there, and I'm still here. And then you come out in the second session and continue to play that way instead of respecting the fact that you've had some fortune to get where you are. That's the bit that really, really puzzles me. It's not like they were on top going to the lunch break, as you say. So there was clearly still work to do. And they just wrapped a bow around it and handed it back to Australia at that point. And I mean, if Khawaja holds the slip catch off Jamie Smith, well, they might not have been defending 204.
And actually, Jim, the thing I thought was interesting was Australia needed 205, and the way that England bowled in the first innings, I was like, this is going to be really tense. This is going to be so tight. But you saw immediately that those bowlers needed more time, needed more rest. They were all knackered. The pace of each of them, because in the first innings, and it is worth spending a bit of time.
They bowled 45 overs in the first innings. Can you say that you're knackered?
I don't disagree.
Day one? Maybe emotionally.
I don't disagree with you. I don't know, but all their pace. It wasn't like one of their paces was down. It was like they were all down. So the ball wasn't zipping through, because that opening spell, especially in the first innings when Smith and Labuschagne were there and it was so tense. I thought I haven't seen an England pace attack bowl like this, Jim, where it was like, it didn't matter what change it was still quick, it was still terrifying. And they had none of that in the second inning.
I think you're right. I think a lot of people, including chiefly Ben Stokes, thought they had enough runs. I think that partnership between Atkinson and Carte at the end, giving it a bit of Humpty, playing some incredible shots, getting them up above 200. I think they thought, it's nowhere near, it's not 300, it's not 350, but the chatter around, a few ex-England captains were saying, I think that's enough if they bowl like they did in the first innings. But yeah, whether it was slightly tiredness or a shock that they were back in the field so soon, or I thought it went flat very, very quickly. And then obviously there's the moment where Archer to Weatherall, the decision's overturned. England think they've nicked him off, but it's hit his back pocket, and that felt like a real turning point. And then I think I heard Stuart Broad saying, he would have liked a lot more atmosphere and sort of England doing what they did in the first innings to go on a lot longer. But when it got to about 40 for none, or whatever it was, it felt like this, it was sort of getting away from them. The body language wasn't great, and yeah, it was sort of like lots of people have been comparing it to Adelaide 2006-07, where that was sort of like a slow, griping loss. One of England's worst anywhere, especially in Australia. Whereas this was like, boom, it was just done. It was like, I think that's why Stokes is saying he's shell-shocked. I think they thought they had a decent sniff, and then Travis Head does what he does, and it's gone, and it's inside 2 days, and they were like, oh shit, that was a real one that got away.
It was interesting afterwards, because a lot of what Stokes said and McCullum was just, well, look, Travis Head's really good, nothing we could do type thing. There wasn't a lot of, and maybe publicly there's no self-reflection, and you presume privately there is, and maybe there isn't. But it did seem like someone could have said, yes, we gave away, 5 wickets in the first innings for nothing. We had that big collapse in the second innings. They were all just like, sometimes you just come up against a brilliant cricketer. And that's not taking away from Travis Head's innings. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it does feel like a bit of a cop out at the times. You would have thought the analysis goes a little bit deeper behind closed doors, but I do think that one of the things with this England team is they talk about keeping out the noise, which means kind of just operating in their own bubble. But I do think that comes with a slight detachment from reality at times, and they probably need to think a little bit more about. There's not a huge amount after such a crushing defeat that they could say that would sort of ease it. But I do think that England supporters probably would like to hear them being a little bit more reflective in their public appearances after a game. It is incredible in the space of 48 hours, the sheer momentum shift and the feeling amongst both sets of supporters, really. I mean, after day one, there genuinely were Australian voices, wondering if they were about to watch the complete breakup of the Australian team in real time, because England had, stumbled across but England have come here with a sustained pace battery, or so it looked. And also England support. I was chatting to one of the tour groups, the tour managers, and he was telling me that he was just taken aback by, after that first day, the number of people that had been in touch asking if they could extend their trips. They saw just that day one performance with the ball and thought, I want the full thing here.
Well, and now they've trips.
Hopefully he didn't say, look, I'll come to you on day 3 and we'll extend it. Hopefully he just said yes straight away and took the money, or he's screwed.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, but back to your point, but I do think that in the post-match press conferences, there are times when England can sort of, what they say can clang a little bit. It doesn't change the result. It probably doesn't really take much of the edge off the feeling in the stands. And actually, a word on the England supporters, because I mean, aside from the Steve Smith chants, which I personally find a bit boring, I did think that was an incredible show of support, particularly for a team that was collapsing and then trying to will them over the line to get those 10 wickets. So kudos to that. 9,000, they kept singing. And England are going to need every bit of that if they're going to pull themselves out of this hole, to be honest.
Sure. Especially because, you spend a lot of money to come here. And if you've got tickets for day 3, I got tickets for day 3 in Melbourne. I'm like, I'm not sure. But sorry, Geoff, you were going to say.
But just the thing about saying that there's nothing you can do. You can say that when it's Stokes 135 at Headingley, right? You can say that when you've set a team 350 and somebody's played the innings of their life. You can't say it when you've set a team 200. What you can do, the thing you could do is add 200 more runs to the target, right? The thing you can do is you've got to be able to set targets that can absorb a good innings or a good partnership, because you have to expect, if you're playing respectfully, if you're respecting the other team that you're up against, you've got to expect that they have players who will be able to play well on any given day, or maybe even 2 days, right? You've got to say, well, okay, set a target that can absorb somebody's good innings and still be good enough to beat them. And that's what England were in the position to do at 1 for 100, and that's what they didn't. But yeah, in terms of this could be wheels off stuff. And this Australian team is not that good. This is what I keep coming back to.
Oh, don't say that.
You look at how they batted in the first innings. You look at how they fell apart in the first innings. That is not a surprising thing to happen from this Australian team. They play on pretty juicy pitches at home and have done for a few years, so that plays a part, that it's not as easy to make big scores. But gee whiz, they've been vulnerable a bunch of times with the bat over the last few years, and it's largely the same personnel. So they're patchy enough that they could give England opportunities, but if England can screw up this game this badly in what is clearly their best opportunity to win one in terms of the personnel they're up against, if you can't beat a team that's got Brendan Doggett on debut and Scott bowling badly in the first innings, and you're still all out for 170, and then you go worse second time around, where can you expect to win a game if you're England? I don't see a lot of upside for them.
But do keep listening to the Guardian Ashes Weekly, even if you don't want to watch any of the cricket.
I hope I'm wrong. I genuinely hope I'm wrong, Max.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't want to watch a 2-day Test match, right? I didn't come all the way to frickin' Perth to watch 2 days of cricket. It is a long way to go from anywhere on the planet, and I don't want to watch 2-day Tests anywhere else. I'm travelling around the country, so please, England, get your act together.
I had so many mates, my whole Melbourne Uni old boys football team, all just like, I had all of Sunday afternoon on the sofa. I'd sorted it all out. I had all my plans, and all just going, what am I going to do now? Anyway, that'll do for part 1. We'll be back in a second. Hello, Max Rushden here.
And I'm Geoff Lemon.
The Guardian Ashes Weekly is supported by Qantas.
One of the lines says, no one can take you to Australia like Qantas.
And that is literally true. Qantas is the only airline that can fly you non-stop from the UK to Australia, London Heathrow to Perth on the Qantas Dreamliner. I've done it. It's good. Have you done it, Geoff?
I've done it, and it was revelatory, actually. The most annoying thing about a long-haul flight is the stopover. You've got to get off. You've got to get back on. You're discombobulated. Not with this one. You get on, you strap in, you watch 6 movies back-to-back, and the next thing you know, you're at the other end.
There speaks a man who doesn't travel with 2 small children. You can also go via Singapore on the amazing A380, so lots of ways to get here.
Slightly personal question for you, Max. Are you getting paid for this gig in dollars or in pounds? Because if you're getting paid in pounds, it's a very good time with the exchange rate right now.
I'm getting paid in pounds. Not enough pounds, management, but pounds they are. And you're right, the exchange rate is good. So if you've been thinking about that big trip down under but never got round to it, maybe now is the time. Qantas, the spirit of Australia. Book now at qantas.com. Welcome to part 2 of the Guardian Ashes Weekly. I just want to go back to, Ali, England's bowling in the second innings compared to the first innings. Now, maybe it wasn't physical fatigue, it was mental fatigue. I don't know, but I just wonder if there's any part of the side that will look at that and say, we need to occupy the crease for longer to give these bowlers, because every time they deliver, every time Mark Wood bowls, he falls over, right? You know, they exerted so much in that first innings to say, I know this is how we bat, but we do need to occupy the crease for a bit longer so our bowlers can get psychologically, mentally, physically ready to do what they did in that first innings. If that could be the way of trying to say, we need to slow it down a bit.
Yeah, and it's a fair point. I mean, there is a kind of perception that England are just hell for leather, and it's true they bat quickly. You know, their run rate, they're a clear one run above anyone else in the world for the last 4 years, and their innings are, it's very rare that they kind of get to the second new ball. But there have been examples in the past of where they have shown some nuance. There was the Old Trafford test against South Africa in 22, and actually a pink ball test in New Zealand a couple of years ago, where they kind of dropped anchor because they were waiting. They were trying to push the innings deep enough so that the new ball would be taken. Sorry, when it was their turn to bowl, that pink ball would be in Stuart Broad's hand with the floodlights on. So they have shown that kind of game awareness in the past, but having said that, it was always a fast forward game, this one, in that respect. The time off the field was not going to be great. Obviously, I guess another night's sleep would have been nice for those fast bowlers. I guess I just look around and just wonder who kind of wanted to put their hand up and be the person in that second innings. And that's, but then you get into sort of slightly dodgy areas as you start questioning people's character and temperament and what have you, which I don't necessarily like to do, particularly when it comes to fast bowlers, just because of the absolute physical effort. But it was clear that there was a sort of combined drop off in their speeds, and particularly for a guy like Mark Wood, who he can't give anything less than 100%. So I wouldn't question his sort of commitment to be that guy, but I just think I kind of think that the early exchanges of that inning, of that run chase, particularly with Head there, I mean, Weatherall they probably wouldn't have been too bothered by. He's not the kind of guy that's going to stress you out. But they do know that if you don't get Head out quickly, then he will punish you. Yeah. And I thought that was a bit of a masterstroke from Australia to put him up there. To be honest, I actually thought the minute David Warner flagged his retirement a few years ago that probably should have been a job for Head to think about, albeit had some great success at number 5.
It's a curious one, isn't it, Ali? Because like you say, yes, Mark Wood's supposed to bowl short bursts, and he always puts in. But he bowled 8 overs in the first innings. Most of them are on day one. So how is it? It can't be that at the end of day 2 he's exhausted. He bowled 3 overs that morning, did he, at Doggett, I think, first thing in the morning, and then came back right at the end of the day. So physically there shouldn't have been an issue, but
I think Max's point about the mental exhaustion is probably more key. That. I think they needed the extra sleep. They needed the extra day, a full day. Having bowled in the morning, and it was. I did find it surprising that Wood did open things up in the morning to try and knock over numbers 10 and 11. I found that slightly strange, but I think from a mental point of view, they could have done with the extra sleep there.
I mean, that seemed logical enough to me. Pelt the bottom pair, get rid of him in a few balls, and then bat all day, and then he can come back tomorrow and bowl. But the mental part, they seem to give up pretty quickly. England, when Travis Head was doing his thing.
I think if they get an early wicket in that chase, I think they were sort of worried that they didn't have enough, even though they would have thought, okay, well that partnership between Atkinson and Cars has sort of given us a decent sniff. I think when they don't get a wicket straight away, they're sort of the fizz started to go out of it a little bit, and the longer that goes on without a wicket, and then that's why the Stokes thing is so crucial, because they turn to him, he turns to himself, and then when he comes on and gets mullered straight away, that's when it's like, oh, we've dropped a clanger here, I think, and then that really hits home.
We've played our last card.
And the next test is a pink ball test, Geoff, and England have their preparation. Obviously, lots of questions about whether they prepared enough for this.
Yeah.
They now have time. There is this 2-day pink ball game in Canberra, which they could play. If it had gone to 5 days, there probably wouldn't be time. Mm-hmm. After the game, Stokes was like, look, we've got our plan. We're not sending our players there. McCullum was a bit more circumspect and was a bit like, well, if a batsman wanted to go, if you're Zach Crawley, then you have 0 runs so far. Maybe you would want to go play that because a pink ball test is...
Because you're going
maybe you wouldn't.
There and
That's
not
true.
Get
That is a good point. But, but like a pink ball game is different and it's hard. And here's a game where they could go and do it and go and get some practice playing a pink ball game. Okay, it's not the Gabba, but still... And they probably won't. We don't know yet. And then you're like, guys, come on, guys, just go and. I know they don't do anything for optics, which is kind of, you respect that, because the optics would be like, guys, it is. We're back in training tomorrow, lads.
Maybe have a little cheeky net. Maybe less golf, more cricket might be the way to go. That might apply to some of the Australians as well. But there's a stat ahead of the pink ball test that I would be considering if I were in that England camp, which is who are the top pink ball wicket takers in history. They are Mitchell Starc, Nathan Lyon, Pat Cummins, and Josh Hazlewood. Now, Josh Hazlewood's not likely to be playing at the Gabba, but the other 3 are. So Australia play a lot of pink ball cricket. Nobody else does. Nathan Lyon, until Jamaica, had played every single pink ball test Australia had ever played. They're used to the format. They're used to the ball. They're used to operating in those evening hours. They've got that rhythm, how to time the game, how to try to bat to the point where you want to be bowling, like Ali was talking about earlier, to make sure that you've got the more difficult time of day to have the ball in hand. And England don't. They've played a smattering of pink ball cricket in different countries across the world. They played, what is it, 1 at home, the one at Edgbaston years and years ago. They played 1 or 2 in India, the New Zealand bit. They're not accustomed to that rhythm. I just don't see why there's a stubbornness to say we don't need to prepare like teams in the past prepared because they were losers and we're winners. Well, you're not going any better than any touring team that's come to Australia before after 1 test. So maybe think about the possible humility of admitting that you could do things a little bit differently. Wouldn't go Australia in this England setup. And I don't know how there isn't more scrutiny, to be honest. On there's quite a bit, but I don't know how there's not more. I heard a comment yesterday that if this were an England football manager managing their team like this, oh no, don't worry about it. No need to do any prep. No, we'll have a 5-a-side on AstroTurf against some of our mates in the developing academy team. You'd be out of the job in 5 minutes. So how is it fine for Brendan McCullum to run things this way and Stokes to have a 2-year contract to supposedly captain this team through until 2027 without any questioning of how they do it?
Just to counter that, in the press conference, Stokes was asked, and he said, "We'll sort of see. The dust needs to settle on the defeat, and we'll make some decisions." But he implied that if they don't send anyone or send a batsman up to Canberra to play or whatever it might be, it's because they want to keep the squad together and they want to keep them gelled. They don't want to send people off to sort of swat up and that sort of thing, because then that becomes these are the guys that we want to get some runs into or get some. Yeah. So he would counter that, I guess, or that very articulate sort of takedown of what they probably will do with saying, it's all about team camaraderie, team morale, and
sure. So send the whole team,
down
send the
pressure.
top 7. I mean, whatever. Get the England Lions out the way and send your top 7 and go face a pink ball and see what you can do. It just seems like they're protecting themselves against embarrassment for the risk of going badly in that game.
Ali?
Yeah, sorry, I don't rate it either, to be honest. The kind of views before in terms of the lack of preparation before the Perth test, I thought were a bit overblown and probably came from a bygone era. In terms of the international schedule, I don't think there's, other than the Wacker, which wasn't available, I don't think there's any other pitch like Perth in the world that or even locally that you can kind of get that feel for. And I do understand that if you extend the tour at the front, then you risk kind of burning guys out by the back end of the series. England want to sort of, they don't want to hothouse their players to the point where at the end they're just waiting to go home. But I think with this match sitting there in the middle of what was a 9-day break has now become a sort of 11-day break. I don't think there's any reason not to play in it. I think they should be getting used to the kind of nuances and vagaries of the Kookaburra ball. There's been 1 pink ball test. They did win it in Mount Maunganui. It was a terrific game, but there aren't that many survivors from that team just because of the sort of turnover that we've had since. And I just think, why wouldn't you want to give yourself a refresher? And the idea that kind of the idea that I understand, maybe not the quicks. You might want to protect the quicks. You're going to manage their workload, so you can keep them ticking over. But chiefly because of that Kookaburra ball, that they're not used to it. It's pink. It does different things, and particularly the batters should be trying to get used to it.
It also leaves them open to what are they going to do, right? Because it's like if they go and play golf now, that's everywhere over every front page ever going. It's like what are they going to do if they don't do that? There is an awful long time between now and that second test match. How are you preparing?
There's no good optics, Jim, right? Like unless they go work in an orphanage for the next 10 days, there's no way to make themselves look like they're not being arrogant.
We should talk about Mitchell Starc, who, I mean, and I was one of many, obviously, who'd, tweeted the series is still alive after the first ball, because I was like, okay, we've got further than we did last time. And then the end of the over, and he gets Zach Crawley, and you think, oh. Then he went on to get career best figures, Geoff. And, especially without Cummins and Hazelwood. And then he comes and does it again. And that catch off Crawley, his whole body is going the other way. He sort of looks like, he looks like, one of those things at a garage forecourt, like those big inflatable things that just goes woof down and catches it. I mean, he was, I'd probably give man of the match to Travis Head for that innings, but he was brilliant in this game, Mitchell Starc.
Do you know what those inflatable guys outside the garage are called? They're called sky dancers.
Sky dancers. Yeah, well, he was much like a sky dancer.
If you want to rent one, that's what you got to go look up. I thought.
Right. Why would I ever want to rent one of those? But that's fine. Maybe we live different lives. How much you've ever rented?
Opening a car wash to fill in the time. Look, Mitchell Starc is unbelievable in that he was a pretty fragile player earlier in his career. Remember that Ashes he played in 2013, he got dropped multiple times through the series. He played 3 tests, but none of them were consecutive. I think his first 12 test matches, 11 of them were non-consecutive. He'd always play a game and then miss games, and often missed with injury, sometimes was left out. He rarely got through long series. He'd be missing by Boxing Day with some sort of injury. And then from about 2019 or so, he's just become more and more resilient. He hasn't missed games with injury. He had that broken finger thing a few years ago. But in terms of like soft tissue injuries, breaking down injuries, it just hasn't happened. He's missed a lot of IPLs earlier in his career and then played a couple more recently and done well there too. But, notching, he had career best figures in Jamaica, which he sort of felt basically embarrassed about because the Pink Dukes ball was it just did too much, and even the Australian bowlers thought it did too much. So 6 for 9 that he took there, which he was a bit sheepish about having as his best figures because he'd never taken more than 6 because he's always bowling with Cummins and Hazelwood who are taking plenty as well. So he's never had that big bag of wickets that sort of comes to define a player's career. And now he's got it here. He's got that 7 for 58. It's in an Ashes test. It's eventually in a match-winning effort. He takes 10 for the match as well. And he was just as important as Boland in that second innings because, there's the breakthrough of Crawley who, if we're honest, England, I don't think anybody in the England setup is banking on Crawley to score runs. They're hoping he will, but Crawley out early is the norm, not the exception. But coming back to back up Boland after that incision, Boland has the 3 and 10 balls, and then Starc goes, cool, I'm going to knock off a couple of the most important players here. I'm going to get rid of Root and get rid of Stokes. And end up with 3 for that innings and 10 for the match when you add it to the 7. It's remarkable how he's got better and better, and people talk about the age of the Australian bowlers, and you can look at Hazelwood with his health and his injuries over the last few years. But Starc doesn't get injured, and he's a better bowler than he was 5 years ago, and he's probably a better bowler than he was 3 years ago.
And actually, you mentioned Boland getting those wickets. It's interesting, Jim, wasn't it? After the first innings, England, basically Boland was written off, going, basically the narrative was England don't really rate this guy. His average is just nowhere near a reflection of how good he is as a bowler. And he didn't bowl well in the first innings, but then he really did put it right on the money in the second innings.
Yeah, he was like 300 for none against England after that first innings, and he was way off it. And dare I say, it looked like a clubby bowler, and was treated a bit like that, and has been in the past. But then he came back in that second innings, was sort of naggingly accurate. The guy that you don't want in that situation, who's just going to make you play every single ball and test out your technique. And maybe if that hadn't happened, he might have played this first test and not made an appearance again for a little while. But it does. Pat Cummins was on commentary for Fox, I think it was, and he was asked whether he's back for the next test, and he sort of said, well, he was a bit more reticent to say he would be than perhaps people thought. So by Boland coming to the party, I guess and Australia winning that match inside 2 days, it means they don't have to parachute Cummins in if he is a slight risk. It means, Hazelwood's probably not going to play it. He might appear later in the series. It means they don't have to go to, the dogs of war straight away. They can just sort of pootle along with Boland and see what happens. Boland might again get worked around and get hit. England definitely fancy taking him on, and they will keep doing that. But he also might, just do that thing where he just quietly chips away at them, Stark can do his thing at the other end, and he's the sort of
pretty good record in pink ball cricket, Jim. But he bowled so well in Hobart during the previous Ashes test, and then took a hat trick in Jamaica a few months ago with the pink one.
Yeah, and he's got things to prove.
Ali?
I was just going to say, England's success in the first innings against Boland wasn't a kind of flurry of boundaries either. It was more a case of being busy and picking him off and not allowing him to settle on a particular line. And just the point I wanted to make, going back to Stark, I think if there's any bowler that I love watching. Watching fast bowling from side on is never great because you kind of don't see the ball, but his run up, the bound. He's a proper thoroughbred athlete. I mean, this guy is, there's just sort of it's just frictionless the way he bounds in, but he's got such a long stride and he's just got such a long, loose delivery, as he winds up and unloads. It's quite a spectacle. The concern for England that I have at the moment is that he now has an early hold over three of their sort of, top six. Because he's done Crawley twice there, he's done Root twice, and he's done Stokes twice, all in the same match. The one that I would be most concerned about, although he's almost the epitome of what McCullum says about being 10 foot tall and bulletproof, because he does seem to be bulletproof, is Crawley. I just wonder with that early hold, I'm already getting the vibes that we had in New Zealand 12 months ago, where Matt Henry had his number. He had his absolute worst series. He averaged 8 in the series. I think it was one of the worst statistically by an England opener in a series, but that was a 3-match series, and had that been a 5-match series, he surely could not have stayed the course there. It's really tricky with Crawley at the moment because this isn't a vintage time for opening partnerships in world cricket, and actually over the last 4 years, him and Duckett got 2,500 runs. They averaged 45 for the first wicket, 5 century partnerships and 14 50 partnerships. They are kind of bizarrely the leading opening pair in Test cricket in that time. You can kind of cut the stats a few ways. Obviously, England play a lot more cricket. They haven't got a spare opener on tour. The only other top order player, I mean, they've got the Lions with them. The only other top order player really is Jacob Ethel, who has opened growing up, but I'm also talking about a bloke there who's never scored a first class 100. And in the limited times we've seen him, he's an excellent ball striker, but sort of building an innings and rotating a strike are still things that he's getting to grips with. So, Australia have sort of opened up an early wound that's been kind of festering.
Yeah, I think if Crawley gets has no runs by the MCG, I wouldn't pick him for Sydney, is what I think, if he's got 0 runs in the first 4 tests.
They're picking Crawley on the basis of 2 things. One is Sydney last time, 4 years ago, when he played nicely and didn't make 100, but got sort of most of the way there. And the other is a few innings in the 23 Ashes. There's the Old Trafford 100, but there were a few quick half centuries as well. And so there was an identification that this guy's not scared of Australian fast bowling and he can hit it. And sometimes it seems like he's better against faster, higher quality bowling than he is against sort of county style seam bowling. And the reason they've kept him in the team through all of those low scoring series is to bring him here and hope that it comes off here. So I just don't think they're going to bail out on him unless he like Marvin Adipatu's it and he's got 6 ducks in the first 6 hits. I reckon if he makes 15 in one innings, they'll go, oh, well, he's shown some signs. He got onto a couple there. They're just not going to drop Crawley, because this is what they've been building him for the last 4 years, and they've got to see if it works. Like, you can't pull out of your gamble at the very last minute.
But then the
and he's very tall.
Pope and Root, if he keeps getting out early, it's more pressure on Pope, who's the other one with a bit of a question mark over him. It's more pressure on Root, who obviously everyone knows about his story down under. I went down into the ground to watch that first over, Max, and it was like, as electric as you would have thought it would be. And then the big build up to the first ball, and then Crawley nicking off after the last one. And this, as I say, my first experience of it, this guy, when Ollie Pope came out to back, stood up, unfurled an Australian flag and started waving it around and just shouted out, "Bit early for a night watchman, Poms." And I was like, okay, this is quite intense now.
Just on Root, I think Fox had, like his stats, his amazing average and all this, but the fact he hasn't got a century, and they called it like the final frontier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe that is stretching it, like in terms of like human exploration across the galaxies. This is the final frontier.
Mm-hmm.
Can he get a century at a pink ball test in Brisbane? Ali, do you think Travis Head opens now for Australia?
God, that was a bit of a tangent, Max.
It was, sorry. I've got lots of...
Sorry, you gave me the big build-up to Root, so I started thinking, and then...
okay. Well, I can ask you a Joe Root question. No, I don't mind.
Well, I mean, you've kind of treated me there a bit like Stark treated Root in that first innings. You hang it wide, wide, and I'm thinking, right.
And then I've just put the in-swinger in.
You've just speared one in there.
Absolutely.
No, it has been a particularly tricky start for Root, and actually that kind of first century in Australia, which does get mentioned every sort of 3 seconds, and I'm sure even the waiters in restaurants are sort of niggling away about it. Does seem...
Yeah, you'd hate him to have a bill that was like $97, and they'd be like, "Oh, yes, still can get you, mate."
Yeah, I mean, we kind of saw, I think that particularly that first innings, we saw it's kind of in microcosm the challenge that he has in Australia, which is with Stark hanging it out there for the first few balls, and that naturally is an area where back home he would be sort of just tucking that behind square, playing one of those late guides, and you can see that he is trying to take that out of his game in Australia. Very wise, but then when the ball comes into him, that fuller ball, if he's playing that with a straighter bat because it's just a normal defensive shot, he's probably just hitting it with a full blade. But because he's seeing that as a release shot, that's where the outside edge is found, and it is a particularly tricky start to the tour. I don't think he's not the kind of guy that. I mean, he'd only be human if he was sort of dwelling on it to a degree, just because the number of people that are sort of dripping that into his ears. But I do, when he says this tour isn't about me, I do believe him, because there's been some pretty selfless cricketers, and I would say that Joe Root is right up there.
Geoff, can I come to you on Australian selection for the next test? Obviously, it depends on fitness of bowlers, but Khawaja did look like, I've played village cricket with some, 70-year-olds, like it was when his back went. I mean, it isn't funny because a bad back is the most painful that you can have, but it didn't even go anywhere near. It was one where, someone like, I can't remember, just like tickled it down to third man, and he's just in the slips, and it just because he moved a slight bit, it was like, oh, he's gone. Yep. So if he's not fit, does Travis Head open, do you think?
Well, also the catch that he had to go down for off Smith, where he wasn't able to get there, it was ankle height, but your first slip has to be getting down to those two. So if you're a liability in the field, and remember he almost dropped the one in the first innings too, that, the big Australian moment, the first over wicket, that bobbles and could have gone down on another day. So if you've got a player who's a problem in the field and then a player who's upsetting the batting order, like, it seems like a liability to want to take him in to the second test, because he might say he's fine, but he also said he was fine to come out and field in the second innings. If you can't get through a fielding innings of 33 overs or a fielding innings of 35 overs, which are the two that he had to deal with, then how broad is the problem? How much can he be trusted? But the Travis Head opening thing has gone around for years, and he has opened in India and did it in Sri Lanka earlier this year as well, where they like him being able to take on the few overs of seam bowling before the spinners come in and get settled. But he's still such a trump card at 5, and that's the thing where, he's won a World Test Championship final batting at 5. He made those 200s in the last Ashes series batting at 5 in cases when Australia were in trouble both times, 3 down without enough on the board at that point. Brisbane and Hobart, he makes those on seaming decks. So there is just the added risk as an opener that you're you're more likely to get that ball that you can't do much about, and like you have to be expendable to a point as an opener, and so I don't think that putting your best asset in that expendable slot is good maths. I just don't think it works probability-wise. But people are very emotional, and they will just see that he's made a great 100 opening the batting, and so he should open the batting for the next 50 years. So he probably will. If Khawaja doesn't come up fit, or if they decide that it's more convenient for Khawaja to not come up fit, then it's probably easier to stick head up to open and find someone for the middle order like Josh Inglis than it is to find another opener.
But it's got competition from Nathan Lyon, right?
Well, yeah. Nathan Lyon was also had his hand up for the spot, apparently. But, I mean, what's the counterfactual? Australia might have won faster if Nathan Lyon had gone out to bat. We'll never know.
That is true.
Do you think that was mind games a little bit? Do you think that, I mean, he was, because the camera was on him with his pads on, do you think that was a bit of sort of Nighthawk shithousery sort of stuff, or do you think that was serious?
Maybe they just didn't know what to do, but the rationale was you put him out there just to try to, absorb a few overs and take the brunt of the energetic England stuff. But I don't know why you would choose to do that with, Lyon's not got a very replaceable skill set, so having him go out and face Archer and having his knuckles broken,
and he would have been hit as well a couple of times, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And sure, he's got a fair bit of recovery time until the next game, but not enough time to mend broken bones.
The thing is, you were very down on Crawley, and he's proved that he's very expendable, which is what you say is something you need to have as an opener. And he's there. He's Sylvester Stallone of expendables when it comes to openers. Ali, finally, look, Bazball has confounded people. This team has confounded people before. It is... Obviously, there's a lot to digest from this test from an England point of view, but they could go to the Gabba with the pink ball and win. I know Geoff doesn't think they will. He's made me convinced we're going to lose 5-0, but this is when this side are at their best, Ali. Tell me.
Well, I do think, despite the sort of disappointing follow-up on the second day, I do think England have kind of shown in that first innings that they do have an attack that can trouble Australia. And Steve Smith is, on record saying that he doesn't like the pink ball at all. He struggles to pick it up. And of course, there's potential to do it. I'm not a huge fan of pink ball Test cricket because I find that lurching conditions is so extreme. I mean, lurches in conditions are part of the game. I understand that. But I just think when you're introducing sort of floodlights, I also, there's loads of reasons why I don't. Partly to do with my own social life, why I don't like.
There's no time for a drink afterwards, right?
Exactly. Yeah, but no, but
plenty of time to sleep in though.
Yeah, that's true. I find that there's an element. There is a greater element of chance and lottery about pink ball cricket, which I don't necessarily like. Nevertheless, they tend to rattle along quite quickly. Although I do know that the ones at the Gabba we have had some sort of ones that have gone slightly deeper. Again, it's a small sample size.
Yeah.
And I suppose England should be looking at the last pink ball test at the Gabba, which was obviously that famous victory for West Indies. So, but now suddenly England are being compared to the West Indies, and as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, blimey, what a turnaround it's been in the last 48 hours.
Anyway, it was entertaining, even if it was short. We'll do it again before the next one and after the next one. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Geoff.
See you next week.
Thanks, Ali.
Cheers, Max.
If you want to get in touch with us, you can. ashes.weekly@theguardian.com. You can find us on YouTube. Follow Guardian Sport on Instagram and TikTok. Ashes Weekly is produced by Nick Harman. Our executive producer is Daniel Seymour. The theme tune is by Rudy Zagadlo. And we'll be back before the second test.